are you?
Good, thank you. And then Hannah, any volunteers? Okay, Aruhi, go ahead.
अथ श्रीमद्भगवद्गीताद्यानां वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचानूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातामहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्।
Thank you. So now we'll move on to reading the verses. Is everyone ready? Does everyone have their Gita next to them? If you guys do, put the thumbs up. React so I can see it.
And does anyone have any questions from last class? Because I know some people were not able to make it, and so on. So just to recap, we went over the homework that was due for last class, and then we kind of discussed like 5 questions, and then like based on breakout rooms and like so on. And then, but we didn't have time to go over new verses, so it was pushed to this class. So hopefully that makes sense for those of you who were in there. And as usual, it's on YouTube. So if anything, I know it's a lot of content today. If you do need to go back, it's available for you there.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think we'll have time for a discussion because we have so many verses to cover. So whatever discussion we did in person, and then a few of you guys were online, it was really nice. We really enjoyed listening to you guys, and hopefully you guys wrote notes down based on the questions that we answered last week, because those are good study questions to use for the exam or just in general to understand whatever we've been reading, okay? So we'll go to chapter 2. We're on verse 41. So we're going to do from verse 41 to 72. Chapter 2 has 72 verses. So say, for example, if there was a question that said, how many verses are in chapter 1 or how many verses are in chapter 2, that's something that you guys should know. And it's just two numbers that you would have to memorize for those two questions, right? But we'll start off with verse 41. So I'll read it once, I'll break it apart once, and then we'll do it all together, even though it's online. Okay. व्यावसायत्मिका बुद्धिः एकेह कुरुनन्दन बहुशाखा ह्यनन्तश्च बुद्धाय व्यावसायिनाम् व्यावसायत्मिका बुद्धिः एकेह कुरुनन्दन बहुशाखा ह्यनन्तश्च बुद्धाय व्यावसायिनाम् व्यावसायत्मिका बुद्धिः एकेह कुरुनन्दन बहुशाखा ह्यनन्तश्च बुद्धाय व्यावसायिनाम्
Okay. So if you look at your Gita, it says, O Arjuna, in those following this path, the buddhi, the understanding, that has the nature of producing conviction, is directed towards a single objective. In those without a spiritual conviction, the understanding gets scattered and pursues a countless ends. So if we break it up quickly, it says Beboshayatmika Buddhi, right? So Beboshaya, if you look here in the Gita, it says in one thing, but I'll break it up into words. So Beboshaya is like firm resolve, like determination, right? And then Atmika is like having the nature of, and Buddhi is like, intellect. So that phrase, Atmika, would be like a determination, like a single pointed intellect, like a mind that is steady, focused, and kind of unwavering in purpose. Okay? And then Ekeha Kurunandana, um, it's like there's one clear focus here, that the spiritual path requires a, you know, unity of, like this unity for purpose, like not scattered intentions, right? So, and then he he addresses Arjuna. He says, "Oh, beloved of the Guru dynasty," right? Arjuna, and um, and then the next part is Bahu Shaka Hiyanantascha Buddhayo Vyavashayinam. So that part, it's like Bahu Shaka, meaning many branched, right? Like a tree spreading in different directions, and kind of it symbolizes our distractions and kind of divided goals, right? Like sometimes you want to do this, sometimes that, instead of being one pointed focus, like this is what I will do. And then Hiyanantasha is like indeed endless, like not just many, but unlimited, and this idea of like constantly multiplying. And Buddhaya Vyavashayinam is like intellect mindsets, and then Avashayinam is like of the undecided. So the one who are not determined, okay? So that phrase would be like the intellects of those who lack the firm resolve. Does that make sense? Yes? Can we move on to the next one? Or do you need me to do a quick recap of the verse? Okay, it's okay. Some people just joined, so I'll just give you a one sentence summary. So it's basically in this verse, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that like true progress, right, especially on the spiritual path, it requires us to be focused and determined, right? And those who possess this Vavashayatmika Buddhi, right, they move forward with a clear aim, undistracted by um, competing desires or fear. And their mind is steady because they know what they truly want, right? In contrast, people who lack the inner resolve, they allow their intellect to kind of branch endlessly and go in scattered direction, chasing many goals at once, success, recognition, and like stuff like that, without really committing deeply to one path, right? So their minds are scattered, restless, and easily swayed. And this prevents like realization or like true fulfillment, right? So through this verse, to Krishna, for us as students too, is very important. It's emphasizing clarity and commitment, right? They're very powerful, and they're more powerful than like intelligence alone. So a single pointed mind advances steadily, while a divided mind remains kind of like stuck, no matter how many options it kind of explores. Does it make sense? So if we kind of ask you on an exam, like, oh, what is Bebo Buddhi? Like, you could kind of explain um, this part. Does it make sense? Any questions? We kind of can do our discussions through questions like between the verses, since we won't have a section for that today. If you have any questions, if not, we can move on.
Which verse are we on?
Verse 41.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move on to the next few verses. So in your Gitas, you can see that there's 3 verses combined together. So there's like this really long chunk paragraph of the meaning. So I guess what I can do is I can just do all 3 verses so it's easier for you to explain the meaning.
Good luck to me.
But so we'll do 42, 43, and 44. And then we'll have like, and then Aditya will explain the meaning. So it's just easier, it's more consistent. Okay, verse 42. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipashchitaha vedavatha partha नान्यदस्तीति वादिनः यामिमं पुष्पितं वाचं प्रवदन्त्यविपश्चितः वेदवादरथ पार्थ नान्यदस्तीति वादिनः यामिमं पुष्पितं वाचं प्रवदन्त्यविपश्चितः वेदवादरथ पार्थ नान्यदस्तीति वादिनः. Okay, so now we'll move to verse 43. Any questions so far on how to pronounce anything? Okay, if not, we'll move on to verse 43. कामात्माना सर्गपर जन्म फलप्रदां क्रियाविशेषबहुलां भोगैश्वर्यगतिं प्रति कामात्माना सर्गपर फलप्रदां क्रियाविशेषबहुलां भोगैश्वर्यगतिं प्रति कामात्माना स्वर्गपारा फलप्रदां क्रियाविशेषबहुलां भोगैश्वर्यगतिं प्रति. Okay, and now we'll move on to verse 44. भोगैश्वर्यप्रसक्तानां तया पारितचेतसां व्यावसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते भोगैश्वर्यप्रसक्तानां तया पारितचेतसां व्यावसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते. भोगैश्वर्यप्रसक्तानां तया पारितचेतसां व्यावसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते.
Okay, so okay, this is gonna be kind of difficult, but I'll try to break it up phrase by phrase, and then give you kind of a summary. Okay, so first we'll do the first two verses, and then I'll do the third. So the first verse, 42 is Yamimam Pushpitam Bacham. So Yamimam means this kind of, right? Pushpitam is flowery, like this kind of ornamented, attractive. That's what it means. And then Bacham means speech, words. So that phrase, Yamimam Pushpitam Bacham, meaning this flowery language. So like basically words that kind of sound impressive and sacred, but are kind of meant to like entice you. And then Pravadanti Pravadantya Vipashchita. Pravadanti meaning speak, proclaim, right? And then Avipashchita is the unwise, those lacking true insight. So basically this phrase is like spoken by the unwise, people who may appear learned but kind of lack the deeper understanding. And then the next part is Veda Vada Rata Partha. Veda Vada meaning literal interpretations of the Vedas. Rata is attached, like kind of being absorbed, and Partha is, of course, referring to Arjuna. So basically, Veda Vada Rata Partha means those obsessed with ritualistic interpretations of the Vedas. So the Vedas give us the instructions for many of our rituals, and so this is what it's referring to. Nannat asti iti vadina. Na annat asti, which is there's nothing else. iti vadina, meaning who insist or claim. So basically, they insist that there's nothing beyond this. So no higher spiritual truth beyond rituals and rewards. Does that make sense so far? Each part. So just a quick recap. We know how many Vedas there are, right? The, quick, guys. How many? Someone. Just
Four.
raise your hand. Just raise your hand and say how many. Someone said four. And can you quickly name them so we know? Do you know, Shanat?
Riksham, Yaju, Atharva.
Yes. Rig, Sham, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. So those are the four Vedas. We can go into a rabbit hole, but we don't have time for that. About like which Vedas kind of give us what kind of instructions, and then we kind of did go over in class like if they were like Smriti, Shruti, and so on. But that's a different convo for later. But this verse is referring to the Vedas. And then verse 43. So kama atmana, meaning kama, desire. Atmana, right? Whose nature it is. So driven by desire. So those who are motivated primarily by personal gain and pleasure. Does that make sense? Like those who want to do things for themselves. And then shwarga para, meaning shwarga, heaven. And then paraha means devoted to, so aiming to. So those whose focus is like focused on heaven. So basically their ultimate goal is pleasure and reward, even if it's spiritual. So they want to attain heaven. So like the ultimate goal of spirituality, as we would say, is to kind of understand our own nature, God realization, right? But for these people, they want heaven. You know how people are like, oh, I hope after I die, I go to heaven, right? So it's referring to those people. And it says Janma Karma Phala Pradam, meaning Janma, rebirth, Karma, action, Phala, result. And Pradam means giving. So it means which produces rebirth as a result of action. So these practices, right, these rituals that they do to kind of attain heaven, these bind them to the cycle of birth and death. So it traps you. So they think it's gonna free me to go to heaven, but heaven is not like the ultimate destination. So you have to come back into the cycle once again, and then Kriya Vishesha Bahulam. Kriya, rituals, actions. Vishesha, elaborate and very specific. Right? Bahulam, meaning full of, excessive. So it's loaded with elaborate rituals, right? So complicated ceremonies with promised outcomes, right? That if you do it, you'll get this kind of result. And then Bhoga Shwarya, Gatim Prati. Bhoga, enjoyment. Ashwarya, power, wealth, status. And then Gatim, destination, or like, where you want to go. And Prati, toward. So it directed toward enjoyment and kind of this material prosperity. Does that make sense? So I can recap two verses together now. So basically, Krishna warns Arjuna about a particular kind of religious thinking that sounds spiritual but is ultimately limiting, right? So our religion, Sanatana Dharma, we do have this ritualistic aspect to it, right? But we shouldn't be too attached to. So some people speak in very flowery language, right? Quoting the Vedas, like, and prescribing elaborate rituals. However, their understanding does not go beyond the material rewards, right? They don't go beyond this idea of pleasure or like heavenly enjoyment. But these people believe that in like these ritual action will and its rewards like are the highest truth, denying that there's like any deeper spiritual goals such as self-realization, as we mentioned earlier, or liberation, right? They're motivated by desires. They perform rituals aimed at like gaining pleasure in this world or the next, right? Shwarga. However, Krishna warns us that such action, no matter how sacred they appear, they actually bind us, bind a person more tightly to the cycle of karma and rebirth. Does that make sense? And by placing these verses after the one we just after 41, about the scattered-minded, desire-driven intellects and so on, versus a single-pointed person, right? He kind of makes a contrast, right? So Sri Krishna is not rejecting the Vedas. Let's be clear, right? He's kind of pointing out this idea and like rejecting this idea of their attachment to the rewards that we kind of expect out of doing the rituals, okay? And then that brings us to the third verse. So bhoga shurya prashaktanam. Bhoga, again, sense enjoyment, right? Ashurya, power, wealth, and then prashaktanam, deeply attached to. So this means those who are strongly attached to pleasure and power. And then daya aparita chetasham. Daya means by that, meaning because of the attachment. Aparita, stolen away, carried off. And then chetasham, minds and consciousness. So, meaning this phrase is saying whose minds stolen away by attachments, right? And then beboshayatmika buddhi, once again. Beboshaya, firm resolve, atmika, the nature of an intellect. So those who are single pointed. Now remember, this is the same phrase we read in verse 41, right? So it's a reference to that. And then it says, samodho na vidiyate. So samadho, in deep concentration, spiritual absorbance, not. And vidiyate is established or like takes place. So it says, does not become established in samadhi. So together, this verse is saying, so Sri Krishna is saying that when a person becomes deeply attached to this idea of pleasure, wealth, status, right? Their mind is gradually pulled outward. So desire doesn't simply mean doesn't simply distract, right? It steals our mind away, making real like sustained reflection, like inner peace and stability kind of impossible. And because of this inner restlessness, right? Because we're very restless and our mind being scattered everywhere is making it even more restless. And the kind of single pointed determined intellect, right? Which is required for spiritual realization. It cannot take place. It cannot take root. So without inner quiet and focus, samadhi, a state of like deep clarity and this kind of alignment, it cannot arise. Right? So together with the previous verses, Sri Krishna's message in like a precise ways, it is not ritual, intelligence, or even belief that kind of blocks spiritual progress, but like this idea of attachment, right? So when the mind is like consumed by this idea of rewards and so on, it cannot like settle into the real truth, the real like gold out there. You know what I'm trying to say? So do you guys want to do a quick recap question to kind of see if you guys understand? Okay. So it's if you were listening, it should be simple. So why can't someone attached to pleasure and wealth attain the state of Bhavoshayatmika Buddhi? Does it make sense, the question? We should try to be quick, guys. We don't have time to do 30 verses. I'm just trying to explain a little bit more elaborately than reading the things from your book, because and then we might not have chances to go over them in detail later on. We might, but just in case. Does anyone want to answer? Quickly? No?
Guys, Adrita just told you guys the answer. It's there. She said it.
I asked you because I know I said. I'm kidding. No. Um, yes, but if you were listening, it should be a quick summary, recap type of answer. Okay. We probably don't have time for this. Let me just. So, if you were asked a question like this on the exam, which is very possible, right? Because if you understand what Mika Buddhi is, and then we kind of even ask you in the question, why is it desire and wealth? Why are they blocking? You would kind of be like, oh, someone attached to pleasure and wealth cannot attain Mika Buddhi because their mind is constantly pulled outward by desire, right? Attachment to enjoyment and like status kind of steals the mind away, right? Aparita Cheta, I think that's the phrase. And it kind of makes it restless and scattered. So as a result, our intellect becomes divided, like branched out into many goals instead of being single pointed. And hence we cannot attain the state of like true inner focus samadhi. Does that make sense? So you would answer it in that type of way. So, yep, we can move on, Manchuri.
I think just to add on to the answer that Andrita gave, you could also say that because the mind is being pulled into so many different directions, the whole purpose of having this Vyavashayatmika Buddhi is having one path and understanding one thing, like choosing one thing and holding on to that and making that your goal. Um, that's what Vyavashayatmika Buddhi is. You have this one goal. But because you have so many other distractions like pleasure, wealth, status, power, these are the things that are basically playing tug of war with you for your whole life. If you're being pulled in every other direction, how are you going to focus on one thing? You know? So you could just say that because you can't focus on one thing, because you can't concentrate on one focus and you're being pulled in so many other directions, that state of Vyabhashayatmika Buddhi can't exist because of kind of all these things that are pulling you out.
If this is very complicated for the younger people, imagine you're studying for exams, final exams. You have a final exam tomorrow for like, give me a subject, biology. And but if you're trying to kind of study from biology, then math, then physics, you're kind of scattered everywhere, right? Instead of kind of allotting your attention and focus in one subject, right? At the end of the day, you kind of get nothing done, right? So it's kind of it's not the like exact, what do you call it, example, but you could kind of see a link between this and what we're trying to discuss here. If it's only for like the younger kids who kind of doesn't, can't wrap their head around. But I think it's pretty clear, even if you take it quite literally from the translation in the book. If you just kind of read through it and kind of underline it, it'll make sense. Like what it's like, this leads to this leads to this, and then he kind of contrasts. Like actually, like you will see that these verses kind of build on each other. So you have to kind of understand them as you go. Because like if you didn't understand Bebashayat Mika Buddhi in verse 41, you won't understand the reference in verse 43. Or I mean verse 44. So you kind of have to go in like chronological order. Okay? Let's move on.
Okay, so now we'll move to verse 45. त्रैगुण्य विषय वेद निस्त्रैगुण्यो भवार्जुन निर्द्वन्द्वो नित्यसत्त्वस्थो निर्योगक्षेम आत्मवान् त्रैगुण्य विषय वेद निस्त्रैगुण्यो भवार्जुन निर्द्वन्द्वो नित्यसत्त्वस्थो निर्योगक्षेम आत्मवान्. Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdando Nitya Sattvastho Niryogakshema Atmavan. So there's two V's here that I want to say. So where you see the line Nirdando Nitya Sattvastho. So you don't pronounce the V there. The V is silent. So it would be Sattva. The V would make a W sound. So Sattvastho. And then the next part, Niryogakshema Atmavan. So you have to say the V there. Okay?
Kind of complicated. No. Just be careful, okay? Um, I was just listening yesterday, and there is Sanskrit is a very phonetic language, right? So there is a correct way to pronounce, like say these verses, right? So it's not like, oh, I can say it in a one way, Ashuri can say it in a different way. You guys can pronounce it different. There's like actually a correct way to pronounce these verses, right? So it's not easy. It's still not easy for like me, let's say. But we can only try, right? So this verse, let's go through it phrase by phrase. So when I'm going through by phrase, you can underline that phrase and kind of make notes to yourself, okay? That's usually what I do. So Traigunne Vishaya Veda. Three. I think that should be and then gunne, qualities. So when it says Traigunne, it's referring to Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, the three gunas. Um, right? You will go, if you we read it, you'll go into details in chapter 14, Gunatraya Bhivaga Yoga, about the details of it. Very interesting and practical chapter. But yes, so it's referring to three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and then it says Vishaya, concerned with, or dealing with the Veda, and then it says Triguna Vishaya Veda. It's saying the Vedas are largely dealing with these three gunas. So, nature's like kind of modes of goodness, sattva, passion or activity, rajas, and inertia, tamas. And especially in their ritual or like practical section. And it says, Nistre gunai bhava arjuna. Nistre guna, beyond the three gunas. And then bhava, become, and then Arjuna, oh Arjuna. So Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna to rise above these three gunas. So he's saying, don't let your identity or actions be ruled by them. This reminds me, you know the story of the robbers. That's what Ramakrishna used to say. About, so he doesn't say Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, but Tamas, quick story time. He's like, oh, let's kill this man. And then Rajas is like, no, actually, let's bind him. And then Sattva took pity on the poor guy and said, you know what? So the two robbers, when he was like, I'll actually release you and drop you at the middle of the road. So the poor man was like, oh my God, yes, thank you. And you know the Stockholm syndrome, like where he's like, actually come to my house with me. You saved me. And the robber was like, no, I can't go back with you. At the end of the day, I'm still a robber. If I go into the city, the cops will catch me. So Sattva can still bind. It's bondage to like this state of peace, happiness, that like knowledge, intellect, that's still a bondage. But the sidetrack was to just say Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, all three bind us. Maybe for different reasons, but Sattva is still a bondage. So here it's saying, that's why Sri Krishna is saying rise above all three gunas. He doesn't say, oh, just attain Sattva. When he says rise above all three, because even Sattva can bind us. And then it says nirdvanda, meaning free from, dvanda meaning like this pair of opposites, like pleasure, pain, success, failure, gain, loss, right? He's saying be free from dualities. So remember those verses were like sukha dukkha, we kind of discussed in the previous class. And then nitya sattva sta, nitya meaning constantly, sattva clarity, balance, purity, and sta meaning established. So he's saying remain firmly established in clarity and like this state of steadiness. And it's this nir yoga shema, meaning yoga, like acquiring what is not attained, shema, meaning protecting what is already attained. So yoga is what is not attained, and then kshema is protecting what is already attained. And ni, meaning be free from. So he's saying be free from anxiety about gain and security. So he's saying stop obsessing over this idea of accumulation, preservation, which is quite a lot in today's day and age. It says atmavan, atma meaning self, and van processing. So be self, like be anchored in the self, in the atman rather than external situations. So basically, Sri Krishna is saying, Arjuna, while the Vedas do address life within the realm of nature's three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, true spiritual progress requires us to rise above their influence, above all three gunas. And instead of being driven by passion, inertia, and as I said, even attachment to goodness, sattva still binds us. So be careful. One can cultivate inner clarity, right? Without becoming dependent on these like external outcomes. So he's saying by remaining free from opposites, right? Anxiety, and then like pain, pleasure, and the opposites I said earlier, and then letting go of anxiety over gain and loss. Like we're anxious, oh my god, what if I lose this? What if I lose that? Right? We're always in this constant fear. He's saying by letting go of that, he's saying stay rooted in steadiness. And then a person becomes unwavering and and you know, self like established in Atman. So this is a direct support to um the single pointed resolve that we were discussing earlier, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's referring to like it's supporting the idea of Bhavashayatmika Buddhi. So that Sri Krishna described earlier. So this is kind of building us towards the essence of Karma Yoga, which will be the next few verses. Does that make sense? I hope this is not like going over your head. Let me know if you want me to simplify it even more when I'm explaining. Does it make sense? Like some of you I feel like are confused. Some of you are just not saying anything, but like for your benefit, just let me know if you should like if you want me to say it in even like simpler terms and so on. It's definitely not easy to catch on the first time. Like it's easier for like Shri or me to make the connections between verses or like to things it's referring to like Traigunai. Like there's so much you can think about with just that phrase. But maybe it's not as obvious to some people just because of exposure. So let me know if you need me to explain more clearly, okay? Because I kind of don't understand, like if you guys are understanding it, if that makes sense. I guess silence is agreement. So I guess we can move on.
Okay, so does everyone understand so far? Anyone want to explain so far what we've talked about? I think we need someone to like
Hey, rephrase.
rephrase whatever. Does anyone want to try to rephrase? Or
No? Come on, guys. You're gonna need to do this sometime in the near future, so better if you practice now. It's a safe space. No one's judging you, because even I don't know the right answer to kind of correct you. Um, anyone?
I hope you guys are also taking notes. Because remember, a lot of people, two of the groups that are going to take the exam are going to have their notebooks. Your notebooks are going to be your biggest help here.
And
So you
even
guys
if you
should be
think
taking
that
notes.
you're gonna go back to YouTube and watch this later, trust me, we have all said that in the past. I've also said that in the past, that I'll watch the recordings of lecture. Time passes by quicker than you think, and you just never get to it. So, better to do it now.
Mhm.
Speaking from experience.
2 times speed does not help, guys. I'm pretty sure it makes you more confused. If you try to 2 times speed does.
Yes, but Tidley, go ahead.
What I wrote down for verse 45 is that by remaining free from opposites like anxiety and other bad feelings, a person becomes better to be focused on certain things and not distracted.
Yeah, that kind of sums up verse 45. And kind of like refers to the other parts because it refers to verse 41, Babasharat Mika, and then it kind of refers to attachments and also to like pleasure and pain, which we kind of discussed in verses 42 and 43. And then this idea of scattered mind. It's very beautifully illustrated. You know, when this is the branches are scattering out, like I don't know if you guys find it beautiful, but it's like very like you can like vividly imagine it. You know what I'm trying to say? Um, maybe not. Maybe it's just me. But reminds me of chapter 15. Remember when we drew the Ashwatha tree back in our days? But like it'll you guys will get there. It's fun. It's fun, trust. When we do in person class, in the past it was really fun. It's still fun now, hopefully, for you guys. Um, but yeah, I guess we can move on.
Okay, so we'll move on to verse 46. यावनर्थ उदापाने सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावन् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्रह्मणस्य विजानतः यावनर्थ उदापाने सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावन् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्रह्मणस्य विजानतः यावनर्थ उदापाने सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावन् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्रह्मणस्य विजानतः.
Okay, so this verse has an analogy. If you look carefully about the ocean and the water. Um, so wait, do you guys feel like it's better if I just like go phrase, explain the meaning, or if I break it down into words for you? Anyone? I'm trying to just do what's best for you guys. Like, do you find it helpful if I say a phrase and then break it down into words and then explain the whole phrase, or does that get confusing for you guys? Okay, words are helpful. Okay, I'll break it down and keep on doing it as I was doing that. Okay, so yavan are the udabani. So it says yavan, meaning as much as or all that, and then artha is referring to water here. And then udapani meaning in the ocean, in a body of water. So it's saying as much water is in the ocean, and then he moves into the second verse. It says sarvata sampluta udake. It says sarvata everywhere, completely, right? Sampluta meaning collected, gathered, and udaken meaning in the water. So all that is present in the ocean spread throughout its water. And it says tavan sarveshu vedeshu. Tavan meaning the same quantity. Sarveshu vedeshu meaning in all the Vedas. So just as a single drop contains the essence of the entire ocean, the essence of all knowledge is contained in the Vedas. And then the next phrase is Brahmanasya Vijanata. So Brahmanasya is like of the realized person, the knower of Brahman. And it's saying Vijayanata. So knows and understands. So the wise person realizes the essence of the Vedas, understands like what the core truth is behind the scriptures. So, first of all, do you guys understand the ocean and the water analogy here? Because that is very important to kind of understand the second part. So it says, you know, the whole entire ocean, right? If you pick up a drop of water from the ocean, it contains the same thing that the whole entire ocean contains, right? So if you pick up one drop of water from the ocean, you can understand what the whole ocean is made out of, because the essence is like basically the same thing is spread throughout the entire ocean. Does that make sense? Right? And then he connects it back to the idea of a realized like person. So how the person perceives the Vedas. So it's saying just as a single handful of water reflects the quality of the entire ocean, the enlightened persons sees the essence of all Vedic knowledge in every part of it. So they don't get lost in this like ritualistic, superficial details, because understanding of the true understanding captures the whole essence of it. So in other words, the wise person, right? They understand the essence of the Vedas and everything. They don't just memorize and do the rituals. They kind of see the bigger picture. So, a wise person sees the essence of all Vedic knowledge, just as a drop of water reflects the entire ocean. Do you guys see the connection, or is that still not clear? Like, there's a reason he made this analogy in this verse. Do you guys understand? Yes? No? Guys, I'm gonna need some kind of feedback. Yes? Okay. So you guys think we can move on? Okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to verse 47. Um, hopefully the next few verses are a little more clear, because it does switch over to kind of karma yoga and understanding how your actions, how you have a relation with your actions, kind of like how you're not bound to whatever you get when you do your actions. We'll see that later on. We also have, there's a whole chapter. Chapter 3 is all about karma yoga. So this is kind of like a sneak peek into kind of what Sri Krishna kind of talks about in karma yoga. We also see we say chapter 2 is kind of like the gist of the Bhagavad Gita, because first of all, there's 72 verses. And also it covers a lot of aspects that we'll see throughout when we finish all the rest of the chapters as well. So we'll move on to verse 47. कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुर्मा ते सङ्गोऽस्तकर्मणि कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुर्मा ते सङ्गोऽस्तकर्मणि कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुर्मा ते सङ्गोऽस्तकर्मणि.
One of my favorite verses. And it's very common. It's very commonly quoted all the time, this verse. You'll see why. It's very, what do you call it? Relatable, especially for us as students. So it says, Karmaneva adhikaraste. Karmani, meaning in action, duty, doing action or duty. Eva, only adhikara. As you know, adhikara, most of you who know Bengali, it makes sense. Right, responsibility. And te, meaning yours. So he's saying karmanyevadhikarasti, meaning your right is only to perform your duty, right? Your responsibility is to act only. And then it says ma phaleshu kadachana, ma, meaning never. Phaleshu, in the fruits, results. Kadachana, at any time. So he's saying ma phaleshu kadachana, never be attached to the results of your actions. Ma karma phalahetu, meaning ma is do not. Karma phalahetu, meaning cause of desire for results. Bhud, meaning be. So he's saying ma karma phalahetu bhud, do not make the results of action your motivation. Ma te shangasta karmani. Ma, meaning do not. Te, yours. Shanga, attachment. Astu, be. A karmani, in action. So he's saying ma te shangasta karmani, do not become attached in a way that leads to inaction. So he's saying, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, focus on your duty, not on what you will get from it. And he says, don't act just to gain rewards, because attachment of result, it like, you can understand it as it like leads to stress, greed, or even disappointment, right? And he says, but he says that does not mean you should avoid action. So doing nothing is also not the answer, right? So he says, okay, don't be attached to attachment. He's like, okay, then I will not do action. He says, but that is also not the answer. He says, inaction is also not the correct way. So he says, you have control over your actions, not their results, right? He says, work without being attached to the results, but at the same time, do not avoid your duties, right? Is that clear? Okay. So that is this verse. And then, like the whole ma, meaning do not, it's like, when we say asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, it's like a similar thing where ma is like, no. It's like negation. Does that make sense? Okay. Any comments, concerns, questions? Okay. I guess no. We can move on.
So now we'll move on to verse 48. And this kind of builds off of verse 47. So 47, 48, they're kind of key verses right now that we're talking about. So the homework so we didn't have homework last week, because you guys decided that we wouldn't have homework last week. So this week you guys have 32 verses for homework. So when we come back, the next time we meet, you guys will have 32 verses to look through. So that's we stopped at 41. So it's 41 to 72. Those are your verses.
If we get to 72, which we will, hopefully will.
Yeah. And if not, I guess,
We'll just push it back somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you guys feel like it's more helpful? Sorry. Do you guys feel like it's more helpful if we do the explanations the way we are? Or do you just want me to like read the meaning and then move on to the next verse and do the pronunciation instead? Answers, guys. Sometimes it feels like only Oshiri and I are talking to each other. Okay. Okay, explanations go. Okay, got it.
Mhm. Okay, so we'll move on to verse 48. योगस्थ कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्ध्यो समो भूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते योगस्थ कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्ध्यो समो भूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते योगस्थ कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्ध्यो समो भूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते
Okay. So, yogasta, meaning yoga, meaning one who is steady in yoga, right? Guru karmani, meaning do your duties. He says take action as required by your life and your role, right? Sangam tyakta. Sangha is attachment. Tyakta is having abandoned. So he says sangam tyakta. He's saying without attachment. So do not like act without holding on to or clinging to success, failure, or personal gain, right? And saying Dhananjaya, of course, referring to Arjuna. And then he says Siddhya Siddho Samo Bhutva. Siddhi, meaning success. Asiddhi, meaning like Siddhya Siddho. When we say it, we say it together. But basically saying Siddhi and then Asiddhi, right? Saying success and failure. Sama Bhutva, equal, balanced, right? Becoming. Saying be the same in success and failure, right? You see the similar concept as we did in the previous verses, right? He's saying be kind of like maintain equanimity, regardless of the outcome. He says samatvam yoga uchyate. Meaning samatvam is evenness, balance, right? Yoga, union, and then with like the self, and uchyate is like is called. So it's saying this balance of mind is called yoga, right? So true yoga is maintaining this inner steadiness while acting in the world. So Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that true yoga is not renouncing action, but performing your duties with inner balance. So a yogi would act without attachment to result, stays steady in success and failure, and keeps mind focused on the self, the Atman. So this way, they they can live fully and kind of act effectively without being kind of like disturbed, restless, or due to the outcomes, which is the essence of karma yoga. So this kind of brings up the topic of nishkam karma for us. So that is like, if you had to say verse 47 in like a shortened phrase, I think the phrase that comes to my head is nishkam karma, selfless action. So being kind of like equal. It's easier said than done, of course. Like, being, oh, just failed something. I'm just gonna be fine, as if I got 100 on it. It's easier said than done, but that is the goal. Make sense? At least thumbs up, guys. Okay? Hopefully it makes sense. Okay.
So now we'll move on to verse 49. Durena hyavaram karma buddhiyoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam kripana phala hetavaha. Durena hyavaram karma buddhiyoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam kripana phala hetavaha. Durena hyavaram karma buddhiyoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam kripana phala hetavaha.
Okay. So it says Durena hyavaram karma, meaning inferior action is far below the standard. So it's saying mere action with attachment, right? Is far inferior to action done with the mind like positioned in evenness. So and then like I'll explain. So it says Durena hyavaram karma. He's saying inferior action is below the standard, and this buddhi yoga dhananjaya is like action done with intelligence and spiritual focus is superior. So and then it says bhutto sharanam ani anvicha, right? I don't, yes. And then it says do not seek refuge only in intellect or clever reasoning, right? Wisdom alone is not enough. And it says kripanna phala hetava. So he's saying kripanna is like miserly, small-minded, And then phala hetava, he's saying motivated only by the desire for results. So he's saying those who act just to gain results are very narrow-minded and weak. So their actions are inferior. So a quick summary is saying detached action, right? Why Buddhi yoga is superior to action motivated by desire or rewards. And he's saying people who only act for profit or success are considered weak-minded. So their actions are inferior. And then he's saying true karma combines intelligence, discernment, detachment, and not just like this cleverness or greed. Does that make sense? So he kind of makes it clear what kind of action is better than what, and he's saying like he is it sounded kind of harsh that he's calling these people very weak-minded, right? Does that make sense? Please say it makes sense. Or please don't say it makes sense, because like if you say it makes sense now in the long run and it doesn't make sense, you're the ones in trouble. Are we good? Okay. So like if Oshiri asks you guys to explain this verse back to us, you guys can explain it. Yes? Aditya, do you have a question?
I'm like a bit confused for verse 49, yeah.
49, the one we just did?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's
Okay.
basically putting it, how do I say it? Like he's ordering it. So he's saying detached action, right? Where you're not like attached, like the previous verse, not attached to success or failure, right? You're kind of like even in both situations. And he's saying that type of action is superior, meaning better than the action with attachment. You know, where people do things, oh, to get this, to like for fame, pleasure, money, or like to attain sharga. Like you remember what we discussed in the past few verses, saying so this like nishkam karma, like where you're even in both parts, is better than doing action for in the hopes for results. Does that part make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second part is saying, and then he's saying the people who do the action for profit, like for money or for the results, they're very weak-minded people. Okay? Does that part make sense? He's like he's telling you categorizing these type of people. And then he's saying um true karma yoga kind of combines like being detached, using your intelligence, and not just having like doing things for greed. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So is it clear now? So he's
Yeah.
just kind of like like doing a summary of the past few verses, if that is clear. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, next verse, I guess.
So now we'll do verse 50. बुद्धियुक्त जहातीह उभेषु कृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगकर्मसु कौशलम् बुद्धियुक्त जहातीह उभेषु कृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगकर्मसु कौशलम् बुद्धियुक्त जहातीह उभेषु कृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगकर्मसु कौशलम्.
Okay, so another very often quoted verse from what I remember. It says buddhi yukta, meaning one who is equipped with wisdom and this power of like discrimination. Like I think like better word would be discernment. If you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Being able to tell the real from the unreal and so on. And he says, Jahati iha ubhi shukriti dushkrite. Jahati meaning abandons or let's go. Iha meaning in this life. Ubhe, both. Shukrita meaning good deeds, good merits, and dushkrite, bad deeds and like bad merits. So he's saying, let go of both good and bad results in this life, right? And it says, Tasmat yoghaya yujashva. Tasmat meaning therefore. Yujashva is like dedicate yourself. It's like therefore dedicate yourself to yoga. Right? And it says yoga karma shukoshalam. Yoga. Saying yoga in action is skillful. Wise action. He's saying perform duty with detachment and mastery. So basically this verse is saying a person equipped with wisdom, right? They perform actions without attachment to good or bad results, right? She's saying by doing so, one practices karma yoga, where work itself means spiritual growth. So true yoga is not renouncing action. It's like not to let go. He's saying, but actually, it's to act skillfully and wisely, right? With the mind anchored in detachment, right? So, like one simple one liner would be like a wise person acts without attachment to results, and this skillful, like detached action, is called yoga. Does that make sense? Yes? You know, it's like this funny joke. It's like we usually hear in lectures, like renounce when the first students, when they hear renunciation, they're like, the first thing I renounce is my studying. But like, that's not what it is, right? Renunciation does not mean inaction. It does not mean to let go of what you do, but rather to do it with detachment. Does that make sense? Okay. Hopefully it makes sense because you're all nodding your head. We can move on? Okay. So green light to next verse, or Shuri.
Okay, so verse 51. Just to say that these verses just build on top of each other. So it's kind of like Sri Krishna says this, and then it's like what it truly happened, like what's the effect of that verse. So in verse 50, he's talking about how when you detach from these kinds of opposites or just the idea of having an uneven, unstable kind of mind, and you kind of move away from this attachment to good and bad actions, that's considered like the highest state of yoga. You're not bound to kind of the good or the bad. So now we'll move on to verse 51. कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्त्वा मनीषिणः जन्मबन्धविनिर्मुक्ता पदं गच्छन्त्यनामयाम् कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्त्वा मनीषिणः जन्मबन्धविनिर्मुक्ता पदं गच्छन्त्यनामयाम् कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्त्वा मनीषिणः जन्मबन्धविनिर्मुक्ता पदं गच्छन्त्यनामयाम्
Okay. So karma jam buddhi yukta. So meaning those whose intellect is equipped with wisdom act in a way that transcends ordinary action. That probably makes no sense to some of you. So I'll explain later. It says he phalam tyakta manishina. He's saying he, indeed, phalam, the fruits, the results. Tyakta, again, abandoned. And he's manishina, the wise, the thoughtful. So the wise act without attachment or results. Again, same concept. And he's saying janmabandha vinir mukta. Janma, birth. Bandha, bondage. Vinirmukta, liberated. Freed from the cycle of birth and death. He says, Padam gachanti anamayam. He's saying Padam, meaning the position, the state. Gachanti, attain. Anamayam, imperishable. Free from suffering. So they attain a liberated state, free from suffering. So Sri Krishna says that those who act with wisdom and detachment, without clinging to rewards, are freed from the cycle of birth and death. By abandoning the attachment to the result of our actions, right? Or their actions, the wise achieve a permanent, imperishable state of liberation, free from suffering and bondage. Clear? So a one sentence, one liner would be like, those who act wisely and without attachment are freed from birth and death and attain an liberated state. Do you see, like, sometimes I'm reading, I'm like, the amount of assurance that Sri Krishna gives in in some of the verses in the Bhagavad Gita. It's like, if you do this, I assure you this will happen. Like, especially I was reading chapter 9, Rajavidya Rajakuya Yoga. There's some verses like, I assure you, if you do this, like um I take what's the word, Vaham, that verse, like, those of you who know I'm talking, he's like, I take over you. So this is a very assuring verse once again. So he's saying you will be freed from this cycle of birth and death. Clear? No clear? Green light to go to next. Okay.
Okay, next verse, verse 52. Yada te mohakalilam buddhirvyatitarishati tada gantasi nirvedam shrutya vyasya srutasya cha. Yada te mohakalilam buddhirvyatitarishati tada gantasi nirvedam shrutavasya srutasya cha. Yada te mohakalilam buddhivyatitarishati tada gantasi nirvedam shrutavasya srutasya cha.
Interesting verse. So it says yada te. Yada meaning when. Te, your. So it's saying when you're in the moha kalilam buddhi. This is moha, delusion, confusion, attachment. Kalilam meaning covered, polluted. Buddhi, intellect, mind. So he's saying when your intellect now clouded by delusion. He's saying vyatitarishati. He's saying crosses over or surpasses, meaning surpasses all confusion or attachment. Tada gantashi nirvedam. Tada meaning what then? Gantashi meaning you will attain, reach. Nirvedam, dispassion, detachment. Then you attain detachment. Srutashacha, shutashacha, meaning you will gain dispassion regarding the teaching and knowledge you have studied. So, Srutavyashya, meaning of what have been heard, scriptures, teachings, right? Shrutashya, meaning of the learned, what has been understood. So he's saying Krishna explains that when a person's mind goes beyond delusion and confusion, right? They develop dispassion and clarity. So the dispassion is a key step in spiritual path, allowing one to see truth beyond, like, the rituals, the results, the attachment. So it comes to a natural outcome of wisdom and experience, right? Making the seeker, like us, kind of detached from these superficial desires and focused on higher knowledge. So in one simple line you could say, when your mind overcomes with confusion, attachment, overcomes, like, goes beyond confusion or attachment, you gain dispassion and clarity towards spiritual teachings. Does that make sense? So when our intellect is covered, we're ignorant. So when that ignorance goes away, um, we understand the true meaning. You know, like that analogy, like, oh, I cannot see the sun because the cloud is covering it, right? But can a cloud actually cover the sun? No, right? That's impossible. So that cloud is like our ignorance. And like the radiant sun is like our true consciousness, our Atman. So our ignorance is covering us. Swamiji's famous words, he's saying, manifest the divinity within already within all of us. We have the divinity within us, but we're just unaware of it, unfortunately. But that's this verse for you guys. Does that make sense? You guys are kind of tired, probably, but what to do? Do you guys want to do something differently? Anything that'll make this a little better for you guys, or no? Keep on going. I guess keep on going. Yeah, I don't know, 2 or 3. No one's answering me as well. I'm equally as confused as you. Okay, keep on going.
Okay, so we'll move on to verse 53. Shruti vipratipanate yada sthashyati nischala samadhavachala buddhi tada yogam avapshashi. Shruti vipratipanate yada sthashyati nischala samadhavachala buddhi tada yogam avapshashi. Shruti vipratipanate yada sthashyati nischala samadhavachala buddhi tada yogam avapshashi.
Okay, so it says Sruti Pratipanna. So when one's understanding, which is confused by Sruti, the spiritual teachings, or when confused, well, like confusion caused by spiritual contradictions, right, is removed. Your yada stayasyati nishchala, when it becomes steady and unshakable, um samadha achala buddhish, the intellect fixed in samadhi, unmoving, tada, then yogam avapshashi, you attain yoga. So basically it's saying when your intellect becomes steady and unwavering, so no longer confused by contradictory teachings or doubts, and remains focused in deep meditation, so samadhi, then you attain yoga. So in other words, clarity of mind, unshakable focus are essential for spiritual realization, right? So once again, Sri Krishna emphasizes that knowledge alone is not enough, right? We have to internalize it. So the mind and the intellect are firmly anchored. So, when we say Sravana, Manana, Nidhyasha, so we listen, we understand, and we apply it. So then we become anchored. Make sense? Hopefully, somewhat. Okay.
I think just to add on, I don't fully remember the story, but the story was this also applies to like meditation, but like there was that one story where someone asked about why their mind was so restless. And how like when they sit to meditate or when they try to focus on something, the mind tends to go in different directions. And I think it was like the example was there was, I think, a lamb or a goat, and they wouldn't stop eating the grass on the side of the road, even though like it was being fed and the lamb or the goat was not listening to its owner. So the owner was like, okay, what to do? So he got the advice that the lamb or the goat, like they should go and eat how much grass, like whatever amount that they want to eat, and then see what happens. That was the advice that the herder had. And what eventually ended up happening was the goat or the lamb, they ate so much, they just didn't want to eat anymore. And that's kind of what the verse is kind of saying, that when your mind is spread out in so many different directions, at one point your mind is going to get tired. Um, and because your mind eventually gets tired, your mind starts to focus on one thing. So that's where here Sri Krishna is saying that eventually, at the end of all this pushing and pulling that you have with everything, with the three gunas, you end up kind of settling in this one point, this concentration of like that one point. And then eventually you attain to that yoga. But there's like work behind it. You have to kind of work towards that goal.
Yeah, you know, when someone usually asks, like Swamiji's like, oh, my mind is so restless when I sit for meditation, all the thoughts decide to come at that moment. And they usually the advice is sit down and watch your mind like run around. At one point it'll get tired and you'll see that your mind calms down. So I think it's similar to the story and the verse. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't think we'll finish all the verses today. Um, Maybe max until 60. Is that what we're feeling?
Yeah, we can do until 60, yeah. Can you guys hear us? Are we lagging? Okay, so you guys can hear us, right?
Yeah, you know, Oshia and I are just coming up with all the reasons to kind of see why you guys are not replying to us. No, I'm kidding. Um, no, but let us know.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay. So we'll move on to verse 54. So you see a switch here. You see a switch from Sri Krishna speaking to Arjuna. So here Arjuna is going to ask a question to Sri Krishna, because Sri Krishna has been talking about how the person who is steadfast, the person who has faith, the person who kind of has that one pointed goal, the character kind of like what you have to do to attain that kind of position. Now, Arjuna, he's going to ask a question that is going to let Sri Krishna answer later on about who this person is and what their characteristics are. But here, Arjuna is asking that question, which will lead Sri Krishna to answer it. Arjuna Yuvacha स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भाषा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितधि किं प्रभाषेत किमाशीत व्रजेत किम् स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भाषा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितधि किं प्रभाषेत किमाशीत व्रजेत किम् स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भाषा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितधि किं प्रभाषेत किमाशीत व्रजेत किम्.
Okay. So Arjuna Vacha. So Arjuna is speaking right now, and he's seeking clarification. He's asking a question, as Ashri said. Stita pragya shika vasha. Stita pragyasya. Of a person with steady wisdom, a wise and stable mind. Ka. What? Vasha. Speech. So what is the speech of a person who is firmly wise? So how does a truly stable person speak? That's the question, right? And he says, Samhadi staya Keshava. Samadhi stasya Keshava. He's saying Samadhi stasya of one established in meditation, inner focus. Okay, Shiva. So how does someone in samadhi speak? It says Stitadi Kim Prabhashita. Stitadi, one whose intellect is steady. Kim Prabhashita. What would they say? How would they express themselves? Right? So how does a person with steady intellect speak? And it says Kimasita Kimashita Virjita Kim. So what should they say? What should they go toward? What do they talk about? What actions do they take? Arjuna wants to know like the practical behavior of a person fully established in wisdom and yoga. So simply saying, after Krishna explains karma yoga, detachment, steadiness of mind, Arjuna asks a very practical question that we probably had all along. He says, so I understand all this so far, but oh Krishna, what does a truly wise, steady mind or meditative person say? How do they act? What do they focus on? So he understands how this ideal, like detached wisdom, looks in everyday life. That's what he wants to know, not just in theory. Does that make sense? So I have a question. I had this question before. He says Tita Pragya, right? Um, and then do you guys remember a similar word we've been discussing in the past few verses? Yes, no? So like do you guys see a connection between Beboshayat Mikabudi and Sita Pragya? Or yes? Is there a difference? Like, or are they just synonyms? Just curious if you guys followed through with that.
Wait, could you repeat the question?
Yes, so we just hear Stita Pragya in Arjuna's question, right? And then we've been discussing this idea of Vibhashanatmika Buddhi, right? Like, do you guys feel like there's a connection? What's the difference if there is any? Like, you don't have to answer now. Just like keep it in the back of your head, because I think that was something I was wondering when I first read it. You guys can answer if you have a question, or we can move on. No, okay. I guess you can think about it, or we can move on. Just to put it out there, like if you like, let's say in a multiple choice, if you had both options as an answer choice, like you know what I'm trying to say, like stuff like that, just to know the slight difference between them. Okay, I guess we can move on, Shri, if no one has an answer.
Okay, so we'll move on to verse 55. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanuggatan atmanyevatmana tushtha sthita pragyastadocchate Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanuggatan atmanyevatmana tushtha स्थितप्रज्ञस्तदोच्यते प्रजाहाति यदा कामान् सर्वान् पार्थमनोगतान् आत्मन्येवात्मना तुष्टः स्थितप्रज्ञस्तदोच्यते
Okay. Sorry if the typing was distracting earlier. I was just making a note to myself. Um, yep. So this verse. So Sri Krishna starts to answer. So Sri Bhagavan Vacha. So Sri Krishna is speaking directly to Arjuna. This Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partho manogatan. Prajahati gives up, abandons. Yada, when. Kaman sarvan, all desires. Partha, O Arjuna. Manogatan, that are in the mind. So, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partho manogatan says, when a person gives up all desires that arise in the mind, Atmaniva atmana tushta. Atmaniva, in the self alone. Atmana tushta, satisfied and content. Is satisfied with the self alone. It says Stita pragnas taduchyate. Stita pragnas, a person of steady wisdom, tada uchyate, when they are called. So such a person is called Stita pragna. So he's saying so this verse together is saying when one abandons all desire in the mind, who is fully satisfied within themselves, relying only on the self, not external objects, they are such a person is called Stita Pragya. So he is giving characteristics of what a Stita Pragya person is like. So sometimes this saying like, oh, we're searching for happiness outside, but the real happiness is within, right? So there's a funny thing we say like, be alone but not lonely. So it's saying you're never lonely, even if you're by yourself, because you're with yourself. So like the happiness is within you. So he starts listing the characteristics of a Sthitaprajna. Do you guys kind of see how he's answering Arjuna's question slowly? So if we were to ask you the same question Arjuna asked to Krishna, you could kind of answer it, right? With what Krishna is saying. So next one.
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
What is what like in verse 55? What do they mean by Atmani Eva Mana Tush? That sentence.
So Atmaneva Atmana Tushta. Atmaneva meaning in the self alone, and then Atmana Tushta meaning satisfied or content. So he's saying you are satisfied with the Atman alone. Like you're satisfied with, like because of the Atman, not because of external things, right? Does that make sense? Because you're satisfied with what you have, like with the Atman, not because of let's say pleasure or like status or things outside in the materialistic world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you for explaining.
No problem. Are we good to move on? Okay.
I think I just want to add on to the point where Adrita said that happiness is within. I think a good example that like you guys can understand is imagine if you had a toy, right? And you get this toy, you really wanted this toy, and you think this toy gives you all the happiness in the world, right? And you play with it every day, and eventually you get tired of playing with the same toy over and over again, and you don't feel as happy anymore, you know? So normally we tend to think that it's because of the toy that you guys are happy, but if you really think about it, it's because you put the value in the toy. So that happiness that's within you, you're putting onto that toy, and that's why you think that you're happy when you have that toy. But eventually, when you got tired of playing with that toy, it's not because the toy stopped giving you happiness, it's because you got tired of using the toy and kind of like the happiness wears off. So it's not necessarily the toy that's giving you happiness, it's whatever value you're placing on the toy that's making you happy. So at the end of the day, happiness comes from within. And that's what Sri Krishna is saying in this verse that because that happiness is within, you wouldn't have to go around searching for it outside when you know that it's inside of you.
It reminds me of the story. I don't know where I heard it. It's probably from some lecture. It's like the young son was begging the mother for a toy, and then he was like, "Mom, this one thing, please. I promise I won't ask you for anything else after this. I promise. And the mom looked at me and was like, you sure? Right? So nothing after this. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is the only thing I want. I will never ask you for anything ever again. We usually do this with God, I know. When we're praying, we're like, please, this one time. And then she was like, okay, yes, I'll buy it for you. So she bought it. And then, as Oshiri was saying, he played with it for a while. And then he got tired and he saw like this new toy came into the store. Something along this line. I'm not saying it word by word. And then he was like, Ma, can I buy this? And she's like, do you remember what you told me? Only this. I will never ask you for anything again. So we're like that. We, as Ashir was saying, we get tired. Our desires never stop. We want something new once we get tired of the old thing.
I
So
think that's mom is appropriate in this story.
his stories are amazing. Like it's
Yeah.
actually so funny if you listen to his classes. But yeah, so we're like that. But he's saying a Stita Pragya person is not like that. Does that make sense? Maybe we should have more story time. So, you guys like the stories?
Hopefully you guys understand the story.
Yes? Okay. Like, whenever we go to lecture, that's the only thing I look for. Maybe I look forward to other things, but like, it's really fun when they tell the stories. So, we can move on.
Okay, verse 56. Dukkeshanuद्विग्नमानः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहा वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते दुःखेषानुद्विग्नमानः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहा वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते दुःखेषानुद्विग्नमानः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहा वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते.
Okay. Um, Hold up. I think I have the wrong verse. Yes. Okay. I was looking at verse 57 instead of 56. Okay. So, Dukeshu and Avignamana, mind is not disturbed in suffering. So, Dukeshu and Avignamana, right? Sukheshu Bhigata Spriha, free from craving a pleasure. Bhitaraga Bhayokroda, free from attachment, fear, and anger. Stita Dhir Muniruchyate, such a steady minded person is called the sage. Does that make sense? So these verses are less complicated than the ones in the middle. Like you could take it for word by word. Although you can of course go into much more details. But so he's saying dukkeshona vignamana, mind is not disturbed in dukkha, right? You're not udbhigna, like as you would say in Bengali, right? When you're faced with dukkha. And he's saying sukheshu bhigata spriha, you're not craving for pleasure. You're not like I'd be happy if I had this, right? And he's saying bhita raga bhayo krodha, raga bhayo and krodha. So he's saying bhita raga bhayo krodha, so attachment, fear, and anger. And he's saying people who do not have these qualities are a steady-minded person who you called a sage. Sthitadin muni richate. So you can call them muni. Does that make sense? Okay. Next one.
Okay, verse 57. या सर्वत्रानभिस्नेहस्तत्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नभिनन्दाति नादिष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. या सर्वत्रानभिस्नेहस् तत्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नभिनन्दाति नादिष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता या सर्वत्रानभिस्नेहस्तत्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नभिनन्दाति नादिष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Okay. Ya sarvatra nabishneha. So he's saying Ya, one who sarvatra, everywhere, in all situations, anabishneha, without attachment. So a person who is unattached in all circumstances. That's what this phrase means. Ya sarvatra nabishneha. Tat tat prapya shubham. Tat meaning whatever comes, whatever is encountered. Prapya, receiving, attaining. Shubha, ashubham, auspicious or inauspicious, meaning good or bad. So whatever comes to them, be it good, be it bad. Na abhinandatina deshti. Na abhinandati meaning does not rejoice. Na deshti does not hate. So they neither rejoice at good, neither grieve at bad. Is it tasya prajna pratishtita? Tasya, of such a person. Prajna, wisdom, intelligence. Pratishtita is established. So their wisdom is firmly established. So he's saying a person who is unattached, you can make these though. They're like 3 bullet points. Unattached in all circumstances, does not celebrate when things are good, and also does not hate or like grieve when things are bad, the outcomes. And then he says, because of this, their mind is firmly established. Do you see? So here he gives the second round of qualities to Arjuna's question. Is it clear? Okay. Next one.
Okay, verse 58. Yada samharate chayam kurmanganiva sarvashaha indriyanindriyarthebhyas tasya pragya pratisthita. Yada samharate chayam kurmanganiva sarvashaha indriyanindriyarthebhyas तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. यदा संहारते चायं कूर्मङ्गानीव सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Okay. So I figure this will be our last verse. Because of time. Okay. So yada samharati chayam. Yada meaning when. Sanharati meaning withdraws or pulls back. Chayam, shadow or reflection. So yada sanharati chayam meaning when a person withdraws the mind from its reflection like a shadow. Kind of hard to follow, but try to imagine it. So when a person withdraws the mind from its reflection like a shadow, right? Kurma naniva sarvasha. Is it kurma? Like a tortoise. Agni is like a sarvasha is like when a tortoise, like a turtle, like withdraws all its limbs into its body, into its shell. So he's helping you imagine it. So he says, imagine when a person withdraws its mind from its reflection like a shadow. Then he says, even to make it easier for you, now imagine how a turtle withdraws all its limbs into its shell. And he says, Indriyani indriyartebhyas. He's saying Indriyani, the senses, and then indriyartebhyas, from the objects, from from pleasures, like from the objects of senses, tasya prajna pratishtita. Again, of that, of such a person, their wisdom is firmly established. So he's saying a wise person controls their senses like a turtle pulling into its limb. So by withdrawing attention from like the distractions or sense pleasures, the intellect becomes steady and firmly established. So this is another sign of a sthita prajna. Does that make sense? So if we were to ask you to describe a sthita prajna, you can be like, oh, they would draw their limbs like a turtle into their shell from the sense pleasures in the world. Does that make sense? So far, so good? Yes? Were you guys confused? Any comments, concerns, questions? We will have to end off here, so we will not be able to finish the chapter today, but most likely finish it in next class.
So your homework for next class will be verses 41 to 58.
Yes. And yeah.
Aditri, do you have a question?
What day is the test gonna be since we didn't finish the chapter?
Mm, I thought it was like second week of January, something like that.
Yeah, but I guess we'll have to, because next week will be in person, and then, but that's the first week of January. The 10th will be online. So maybe like the 3rd or 4th week of January.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, something like that. Let me just check the syllabus real quick. Yeah, I think things are just gonna get pushed back slightly.
Yeah, because it showed it that it was in December, but now it's in January.
Yeah, so it's kind of difficult to finish chapter 2 in such a short amount of time, even though we had like 6 weeks. Yes, Deeply, do you have a question?
Yeah. Can we use our Gitas on like the exams?
Depends on what group you're in.
I
I
think you
don't.
can only use your notebook. You can't use the Gita.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So whatever group you're in, I think it's the elementary school kids and the middle school kids. You guys can use your notebooks. And then the kids who are in high school, so like 9th to 12th, they can't use any notes. But it's less questions for them.
Yeah, and yeah, I think we would have kind of been on schedule if we had done the verses last week, but it's okay. Yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions, we can do the concluding prayer.
Mhm. I think Aditri wanted to do it. The concluding prayer. The second one.
I think she might be
I think,
lagging.
yeah.
Does anyone else want to do it? I doubt.
Um, I don't have the prayer sheet.
I can share it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Just give me 1 second.
Can we do it next time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yay!
Okay, Adna, can you see it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Bhumi Mangalam, Udaka Mangalam, Agni Mangalam, Vayu Mangalam, Gagana Mangalam, Surya Mangalam, Chandra Mangalam, Deha Mangalam, Mano Mangalam, Jiva Mangalam, Atma Mangalam.
mangalam, atma mangalam, sarva mangalam, bhavatu bhavatu bhavatu, sarva mangalam, bhavatu bhavatu bhavatu. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Srimacharnar Pranamastu.
Well, thank you guys for coming on a very snowy day and during break. And Merry Christmas, belated Merry Christmas, and early Happy New Year's.
So
And
yeah, we won't see you guys until the new year.
yep, I hope the
The
new
big
year
26.
brings all good things for you guys.